The slap landed before anyone saw it coming. It cracked through the marble lobby of Seoul International University like a gunshot, and every head turned. A crystal champagne flute hit the floor and shattered. The crowd parted. And there, standing in the center of it all, was Jeon Minjun, heir to the Jeon crime syndicate, the most dangerous and beautiful man in the building, touching his cheek with 2 fingers, staring at the girl who had just hit him. Not one of the girls who had spent 3 months engineering an invitation to this welcome reception. Not the daughter of a senator. Not the influencer in the backless red dress who had already posted 4 photos with him tonight. It was the quiet black girl from room 214. Amara Osebonsu had not meant to slap him. She had meant to grab her notebook, the one he had knocked off the reception table without a single apology when he turned to greet yet another giggling admirer. She had reached for it. He had turned again without looking. Her palm had connected with his jaw at full force. The room went silent. Amara's chest was heaving. Her notebook was on the floor between them. Her dark skin was glowing under the chandelier light, her braids were pulled into a loose pile on top of her head, and she was wearing an oversized university hoodie in a room full of cocktail dresses. She looked like she wanted the marble to swallow her whole. Minjun looked at her for 3 full seconds without speaking. Then he picked up her notebook. Held it out to her. "Yours," he said. She snatched it. Turned. Walked away so fast she nearly knocked over a waiter. The entire room exhaled. But Minjun did not move. He stood exactly where she had left him, still touching his jaw, watching the door she had disappeared through. And something shifted in his face that none of the girls watching him had ever seen before, not in all the months they had spent studying him, tracking his schedule, perfecting their approaches. Something quiet. Something almost like curiosity. His best friend, Park Ji-soo, appeared at his shoulder with a fresh glass of champagne and a grin sharp enough to cut glass. So. The African girl with the notebook just slapped the most feared man in 3 provinces. He sipped. "This is genuinely the best night of my life." Minjun said nothing. He was still watching the door. Amara Osebonsu had come to Seoul on a scholarship she had fought 4 years to earn. She had not come for parties. She had not come to impress anyone. She was a 3rd-year literature and linguistics student from Accra, Ghana, and she had exactly one goal: finish her research thesis on the influence of Korean oral storytelling traditions on modern diaspora writing, graduate with distinction, and go home. She had not accounted for the Jeon problem. She knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. You could not walk across the Seoul International campus without seeing his name carved into a building, or seeing the whisper chain reaction that started every time he entered a room. Jeon Minjun. 23. 6 feet of controlled silence and expensive cologne. Son of Jeon Woosen, whose name nobody said out loud in certain parts of the city. Amara had been careful to find him profoundly uninteresting. She was good at this. She had grown up in a house full of noise, 4 brothers, a mother who sang too loudly in church, a father who turned every dinner into a debate, and she had learned early how to build silence inside herself like a room she could step into. She studied in the library at hours when it was nearly empty. She ate at odd times to avoid the dining hall rush. She smiled at people in the corridors and remembered none of their names. She had a system. The system worked. And then she had slapped the most dangerous man in the university and the system was officially dead. She sat on the steps outside the East Wing, pressing her notebook against her chest, telling herself to breathe. The October air was cold and smelled like rain and street food from the vendors outside the campus gate. She focused on that. The smell. The cold. The fact that she was still alive. "You forgot your pen." She spun around so fast she nearly fell off the step. Minjun was standing 3 feet behind her, holding a silver pen. Her silver pen, the one with the broken clip that she had owned since secondary school. He must have picked it up from the floor near her notebook. He was alone. No entourage. No crowd. In the cold air outside the lobby, without 40 people performing reactions around him, he looked startlingly normal. Just a tall, sharp-jawed man in a dark shirt, holding a pen, watching her with an expression she could not decode. "How did you even know where she started?" "You walk fast," he said. "But you walk in straight lines." She stared at him. He held the pen out. She took it. Their fingers did not touch. She made sure of it. "I'm sorry," she said stiffly. I didn't mean to. You turned into my hand." "I know." A pause. "I'm sorry about the notebook." She blinked. An apology. From Jeon Minjun. She had seen 3 separate girls cry in the bathroom this semester over things he had allegedly said or not said, and he was standing here apologizing to her for a knocked notebook. "Okay," she said carefully. "We're even." He nodded once. He should have left. She could see that he knew he should leave. He stayed another 4 seconds, she counted, and then turned and walked back inside. Amara sat very still on the cold steps. She opened her notebook. Tried to find the page she had been on. She read the same sentence 6 times and retained nothing. *Hey, before we go further, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Are you part of the Afro-Korean community, or did the title just pull you in? I want to know, comment right now, *. 3 days passed. Amara did not see him. She told herself this was ideal. She returned to her system. Library at 6 in the morning. Breakfast alone. Seminars. Research. Dinner at 8 when the hall was half empty. She stopped replaying the cold steps outside the east wing. She stopped counting the 4 seconds he had stayed longer than he needed to. She was exceptionally good at deciding not to think about things, and she applied this skill with full force. On the 4th day, he sat down across from her in the library. She was in her corner, the one by the window on the 3rd floor that nobody used because the heating vent above it made a faint rattling sound. She had claimed this spot in her first week and it had remained hers every morning since. There were 40 empty tables between the entrance and where she sat. He walked past all of them and put his bag down directly across from her without asking. She looked up. He opened a book. He did not look at her. She looked back down at her work. For 45 minutes, they sat in complete silence. It should have been uncomfortable. It was, she realized with deep suspicion, not uncomfortable at all. He read. She wrote. The vent rattled above them. Outside the window, the campus woke up slowly, students crossing the courtyard, a groundskeeper raking leaves, the distant sound of the morning bell from the admin block. It felt, unsettlingly, like something she had done before. Like a habit she had not formed yet but already recognized. When she finally packed her bag to leave for her 9 o'clock seminar, he still did not speak. She stood. Pushed her chair in. Walked 3 steps. Your thesis, he said. She stopped. Turned. He was looking at her now. His eyes were darker than she expected up close. Sharp. Careful. Like a man who had learned to measure everything before touching it. What about it, she said. The oral storytelling angle. You'll need access to the Jeon Cultural Archive if you want primary sources from the Joseon period. A pause. Most people don't know it exists. She stared at him. How do you know what my thesis is about? Professor Lim mentioned a Ghanaian student working on diaspora linguistics in the faculty newsletter. There aren't many of those. His voice was even. Neutral. Like he was reporting facts and not admitting he had looked her up. The archive is private. I can arrange access. The word private landed with weight. She was not going to pretend she didn't notice. Private. Jeon private. The kind of private that meant the archive existed because his family had funded it, probably the same way his family funded the East Wing and the scholarship endowment and at least 2 of the campus security officers, if the rumors were anything close to accurate. "Why would you do that?" she asked. He considered the question for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Because your research is legitimate." It was possibly the most clinical act of generosity she had ever been offered. She should say no. She ran the calculation instantly, the way she had learned to run calculations about everything in the years since she'd understood that nothing in rooms like this, rooms where power sat quietly and watched, came without a cost she would be asked to pay later. "I'll think about it," she said. She left before he could respond. What Amara did not know, what she could not have known standing in that library with her bag on her shoulder and her guard firmly in place, was that Jeon Minjun had not sat down across from her on impulse. He had done it on the 5th attempt. The first 4 mornings, he had come to the 3rd floor, seen her in the corner by the rattling vent, and left. Not because he was afraid of her. Minjun had learned fear the way most people learn table manners, early, thoroughly, and with painful instruction, and he had since removed it from himself the way a surgeon removes something dangerous and unnecessary. He was not afraid of a literature student with a notebook. He was afraid of what happened in his chest when he saw her, which was nothing dramatic, nothing loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was the feeling of a room going quiet. He had been surrounded by noise his entire life. His father's voice. His father's associates. The particular silence that fell over dinner tables when John Woozing was displeased. The screaming absence left by his mother, who had walked out of their house in Gangnam when Minjun was 9 years old and had not sent so much as a letter since. He had grown up inside noise the way some people grow up inside weather, constantly, inescapably, until you stopped noticing it was there. Amara was quiet in a way that was not absence. It was presence. A specific, deliberate, chosen presence that took up exactly the space it needed and not 1 centimeter more. He had noticed it the night she slapped him, not the slap itself, but the 2 seconds before it, when she had been reaching for her notebook with full concentration and no awareness of anyone watching her. He had never seen anyone so completely inside their own world in a room full of people performing for each other. He had gone back to his apartment that night and sat on his balcony for 2 hours. He had not told Jisoo any of this, because Jisoo would laugh for approximately 40 minutes and then immediately use the information in a way that would be catastrophic for everyone. He had not told his father, because his father had opinions about the women appropriate for a John, and those opinions were narrow, strategic, and entirely without warmth. He had sat alone on his balcony, above the lights of Seoul, and turned the problem over in his hands like something he had found and did not yet know the name of. He was still turning it. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday, wearing 6-inch heels and a smile like a freshly sharpened blade. Her name was Han Soyeon. And she had just landed back in Seoul. Han Soyeon did not walk into rooms. She detonated into them. She was the daughter of Han Byung-chul, the single most powerful business ally of the John Syndicate, and she had spent the last 8 months in Paris doing what beautiful, calculating women with unlimited budgets did in Paris, becoming more of everything she already was. She came back with new hair, new clothes, and the same plan she had carried since she was 17 years old, the plan she had never once discussed out loud because women like Soyeon understood that the loudest ambitions were the ones that got dismantled. She was going to marry Jeon Minjun. Not because she loved him. Love was a word Soyeon associated with people who had not yet understood how the world actually worked. She was going to marry him because their union would merge 2 of the most formidable networks in South Korea, because her father had been angling toward this conversation for years, and because Soyeon had looked at every man in her orbit and concluded that Minjun was the only one whose intelligence she would not eventually find insulting. She had also, she would admit privately and only to herself, been half in love with him since she was 19. But that was beside the point. Sentiment was a passenger. Strategy drove. She found him on campus. She had enrolled for a single graduate seminar purely to have legitimate access to his world, and when she saw him across the faculty courtyard on her first morning back, she felt the familiar pull of him, that dark, quiet gravity he carried, and she smiled to herself and began walking toward him. She was 12 steps away when she saw where he was looking. He was not looking at her. He was looking at a girl sitting on the low wall beside the courtyard fountain, a black girl, braids loose today, reading a book and eating a tangerine with the focused satisfaction of someone who had fully forgotten that other people existed. The girl peeled a segment slowly. Turned a page. Did not look up. Minjun was leaning against the opposite wall with his coffee, and he was watching her the way you watch something rare. Carefully. Like he was memorizing it and did not want to get caught. Soyeon stopped walking. She had seen Minjun look at many things in the years she had known him, deals, problems, people who had underestimated his family, the middle distance when he was deciding something. She had never seen him look at a person the way he was looking at this girl. It lasted only a few seconds. Then he felt Soyeon's presence. He always felt when someone was watching him, it was practically a survival reflex, and his eyes moved to her. His expression closed instantly, the way a door closes, smooth and complete. Soyeon, he said. You're back. Surprised? She smiled and kissed his cheek, the way old family friends did, casual and proprietary at once. No, he said. Which was its own answer. She glanced toward the fountain. The girl had finished her tangerine, closed her book, and was walking away across the courtyard without having looked at either of them once. Who is that? Soyeon asked pleasantly. Minjun picked up his coffee. A student. Soyeon watched the retreating braids until they disappeared around the corner of the humanities building. She filed the information away in the organized, ruthless cabinet of her mind and turned back to Minjun with her warmest smile. Have dinner with me tonight. I want to hear everything I missed. He agreed because refusing Soyeon in public was the kind of thing that sent ripples, and Minjun disliked ripples he had not personally caused. But his eyes moved once more, briefly, to the empty space where the girl had been. Soyeon noticed. She noticed everything. Amara had not noticed Jeon Minjun watching her from across the courtyard, because she had been genuinely consumed by her chapter and her tangerine and the specific pleasure of both at once. This was one of the things about her that he could not have explained to anyone, that her obliviousness to him was not performance. It was not strategy. It was the simple, extraordinary fact that she had a rich enough inner world that the outer one frequently became optional. What she had noticed, walking back toward the humanities building, was that someone had slipped a folded piece of paper into her bag. She discovered it when she reached her seminar room and pulled out her notebook. She unfolded it slowly. Inside, in clean, spare handwriting that she would not have been able to identify then but would come to know by heart later, were two things. A date. A time. And a building address in the Jongno district. Below that, one line, asterisk the archive. No obligation. Come if it's useful, asterisk. She read it 3 times. She folded it precisely back along its original creases. She put it in the front pocket of her hoodie, where she put things she was still deciding about. She told herself she had not already decided. She told her roommate, Chidinma, about it that evening, which was a tactical error, because Chidinma was Nigerian and loud and had the romantic instincts of someone who had consumed 10,000 K-dramas and considered this an academic qualification. Amara. Chidinma sat up from her bed like a woman receiving divine revelation. Jeon Minjun put a personal note in your bag. It's about the archive. It's academic. He walked close enough to your bag to put something in it and you didn't feel it. Chidinma pointed. That man is a ghost when he wants to be. He chose to be a ghost specifically near you. She paused. Amara. Stop saying my name like that. I will stop saying your name like that when you stop lying to yourself. Chidinma fell back against her pillow dramatically. You're going, obviously. Amara stared at the ceiling. She was going. Obviously. The Jeon Cultural Archive was not what she expected. She had pictured something cold. Steel shelving. Fluorescent lights. The sterile, guarded atmosphere of a place that existed to impress rather than welcome. She had prepared herself for discomfort, for the feeling of being watched and measured, for some assistant in a sharp suit who would ask for her credentials twice and make her wait in a chair that faced a wall. Instead, the address led her to a narrow building tucked between a tea house and a calligraphy shop in Jongno, with a wooden door that looked older than the street around it. When she pushed it open, she walked into a room that smelled like aged paper and cedar and something faintly floral she could not name. Floor-to-ceiling shelves. Low amber lighting. Reading tables with proper lamps. Silence that felt intentional, not imposed. Minjun was already there, sitting at the far table with two folders open in front of him. He stood when she entered. She noted this and filed it away without reacting to it. "You came," he said. "I said I'd think about it," she replied. "I thought about it." The corner of his mouth moved. It was barely a smile. It was enough. He showed her the archive without ceremony, which she appreciated. No grand tour. No performance of generosity. He simply walked her through the organizational system, pointed out the sections relevant to her thesis, oral records from the late Joseon period, transcribed folk narratives, a collection of letters between traveling merchants that contained embedded storytelling traditions she had never seen referenced in any academic paper she had read. Her hands moved carefully over the folders. Her breath slowed. This was the feeling she had crossed an ocean for. This specific feeling of a door opening. "These merchant letters," she said quietly. "Have they been translated?" "Partially. The full collection hasn't been formally catalogued." She looked up at him. "Why not?" He was watching her hands on the folders. No one asked the right questions before. She held his gaze for exactly as long as was comfortable, then looked back down. "I'll need to come back. Multiple times. The door code is 4-7-1-2, he said. "Come whenever the work requires it." She went still. He was giving her the code. Unsupervised access to a private Jeon archive. She turned this over in her mind the way she turned everything over, carefully, looking for the catch. Looking for the shape of what this would cost her. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Not the polite version of the question. The real one. Direct. Unvarnished. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not answer. "Because you're going to write something true," he said finally. "And true things are harder to come by than people admit." She did not know what to do with that. She nodded once. She sat down at the reading table and opened the first merchant letter. He sat across from her. They worked in silence for 2 hours. It was, she would think later, the best 2 hours she had spent in Seoul. What happened the following morning was the beginning of the end of peace. Soyeon moved efficiently. She always did. By the time Amara arrived at the campus library for her 6 o'clock morning session, there were already 3 girls waiting, not for her specifically, but positioned with the practiced casualness of people who had been told where to be. Soyeon was not among them. Soyeon was never at the scene. She was the architect, never the instrument. The first girl was Kim Haina, a second-year business student who smiled at Amara with teeth and said, loudly enough for the students nearby to hear, "You know there's a photo of you going around, right? Someone saw you going into Jeon Minjun's private building in Jongno last night." Amara set her bag down slowly. "Good morning to you too. People are talking," Haina continued, undeterred. "Everyone knows what that building is for." The implication sat in the air like smoke. Amara looked at her with the calm that people consistently mistook for shyness and was actually something closer to controlled precision. "What people say about me," she said quietly, "is not my responsibility to manage." She opened her notebook. "I'd appreciate the quiet." Haina's smile tightened. She left. But the damage was already cellular. By noon, something had shifted in the atmosphere around Amara. The sideways glances. The conversations that paused when she entered the dining hall. A girl she had never spoken to laughing behind her hand in the corridor. It was the specific social violence of rumor, nothing provable, nothing confrontable, everything felt. Chidinma, who monitored campus social energy the way meteorologists monitored pressure systems, showed up at Amara's seminar door at 12:30 with 2 cups of coffee and an expression like incoming weather. "It's Soy Ian," she said without preamble. Amara took the coffee. "I don't know who that is." "Han Soy Ian. She got back from Paris 4 days ago. She and Minjun have a thing. Long history. Their fathers are business partners." Chidinma sat down. "She doesn't do anything directly. She just arranges the temperature of a room and lets other people burn in it." Amara stared at her coffee cup. The archive. The merchant letters. The door code he had given her like it was nothing. And now this, the price arriving right on schedule, wearing different faces. "I'm not in competition with anyone," Amara said. "Amara." Chidinma's voice dropped. Softer now. The underneath version of her voice that only appeared when something was serious. "She thinks you are. And that's the only thing that matters." Amara's jaw tightened. She said nothing. Outside the seminar window, across the courtyard, Minjun's black car was pulling up to the faculty entrance. He stepped out. And even from this distance, even through glass, his eyes found the seminar window like he had known exactly where to look. Amara stepped back from the glass. Her heart was doing something she refused to name. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening without warning. Amara was leaving the archive, alone, past 7, her bag heavy with photocopied merchant letters and 3 pages of notes she was proud of, when Soy Ian stepped out of a black car parked directly in front of the wooden door. She was wearing a cream coat and the expression of someone who had rehearsed this moment and found it beneath her to show it. "Amara Osebonsu," she said. Pronouncing each syllable with careful, deliberate precision. Like a woman who had done her research. "I think it's time we talked." Amara stopped. Adjusted the strap of her bag. "I don't know you." "No." Soy Ian smiled. "But you know what I am." She stepped closer. Not threatening, she was too intelligent for anything that read as threatening. Just close enough that the conversation became private. "I'm going to be very direct with you, because I respect intelligence and your academic record suggests you have it." A pause. "Walk away from Minjun. Whatever this is, the library, the archive, the notes in your bag, end it. Go back to being invisible. You were very good at it." The words landed with precision. Amara felt them. She felt the specific target of them, not her body, not her face, but the thing inside her that had always been most careful, the part that had learned early that certain rooms were not built for her and had made peace with standing in doorways instead. She breathed once. "No," she said. Soy Ian blinked. It was the fastest Amara had ever seen her composure move. "My research is legitimate," Amara continued, her voice even and low. "My access to that archive was offered freely. I have not pursued Jeon Minjun. I have not performed for him. I have not rearranged myself to be something he would notice." She held Soyan's gaze without flinching. "I came to Seoul to work. I am working. And I will not make myself smaller because your plans require more space than you've honestly earned." The silence between them was its own weather system. Then Soy Ian said, very quietly, "You have no idea what his world costs." "Neither do you," Amara said. "Or you wouldn't be standing outside an archive at 7 in the evening threatening a literature student." She walked past her. Her hands were shaking inside her coat pockets. She did not let it reach her face. Minjun found out about the confrontation the same night. Not from Amara. He found out because Jisoo had been 2 streets away picking up food when he saw Soyeon's car, and Jisoo, for all his sharpness and irreverence, was viciously loyal in the specific way of people who had watched Minjun survive things they never spoke about. He told Minjun with no dramatics. Just facts, delivered cleanly. Minjun listened without moving. When Jisoo finished, the silence in the room changed texture. She's been running the narrative on campus, Jisoo added carefully. The rumor about the building. The girls positioned in the library. It's been coordinated since she landed. Minjun stood up from his desk. Crossed to the window. Soul spread below him, indifferent and luminous, and he looked at it for a long time without seeing it. He was seeing, instead, the particular expression on Amara's face the morning in the library when she found the first merchant letter, not excitement, which would have been understandable. Something quieter. Recognition. Like the document had confirmed something she already carried. He had spent 23 years in a world where everything and everyone had a function. His father had built a life on this principle: people were assets or liabilities, relationships were leverage, warmth was a negotiating position. Minjun had absorbed this the way you absorb cold when you live in it long enough. He had not known it was possible to sit across from someone for 2 hours in complete silence and feel, for the first time in memory, that he was not performing anything. He picked up his phone. He called his father. This was not a small thing. These were not calls made casually. There's a conversation we need to have, he said when John Woozing answered. About the Han arrangement. His father's pause was glacial. That arrangement has been understood for years. It's been assumed, Minjun said. I'm clarifying that my understanding is different. The call lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, Minjun stood very still in the center of his apartment, and the thing that surprised him most was how clearly he could breathe. He went to the archive the next morning before it opened. He sat on the low step outside the wooden door and waited. Amara arrived at 7:15 with her bag and her notebook and her coffee and the absolute self-contained composure of a woman who had decided something and was living inside that decision. She saw him on the step and stopped 4 feet away. You didn't have to do that, she said. Soyeon crossed a line. I handled it. I know you did. He looked up at her. Morning light. Her braids were down today, falling around her shoulders, and she was in her hoodie again, and she looked nothing like the world he had been born into and everything like the thing he had been unable to name for weeks. I handled my side of it. She studied him for a long moment. She was so careful. He had come to understand that her carefulness was not fear. It was respect, for her own instincts, for the truth of things, for the cost of being wrong. The merchant letters in Section 4, she said finally. I think they're connected to a West African trade oral tradition from the same period. He stood up. Show me. She pushed the door open. He followed her inside. The archive smelled like cedar and aged paper and something faintly floral. The door closed behind them. Outside, Seoul moved at full volume. Inside, there was only the good, chosen quiet, the kind that is not absence but presence. Not emptiness, but 2 people taking up exactly the space they needed and not 1 centimeter more. It was, for both of them, the beginning of something true. Asterisk if this story held you from the first slap to the last line, smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss a story like this, and drop a comment telling me which character hit different for you. Was it Amara's quiet strength? Minjun's slow unraveling? Or Soyeon's cold precision? Tell me everything. See you in the next one, asterisk.